full screen here. Hold on one second, Deb.
Oh, so okay, no problem. And I'm glad that I looked down to make sure
Okay.
that we are recording. And let me make sure that everyone knows that this is none other than Miss Patricia Veney on the
Thank
line with us
you.
today, CPA, 20 plus years experience, and sharing with us how you recognize that April 15th is just the deadline. It's more to the story. We want you to smile on that day, not to be stressed out.
There you go. And Deborah, as I said before, finances is important to me. So I'm not just going to zero in on this July 15th deadline. I'm trying to fix my face, right? But I'm just going to talk a little bit about finances for business owners in general. That's okay. Okay?
Absolutely.
So again, I'm a CPA. I'm located in Owings Mills, Maryland. And even though I'm in Owings Mills, Maryland, I have clients all over the world. And thanks to this new technology, and it's new to me because, Deborah, I'm still trying to figure it all out, I'm able to access and talk to my clients all over the world. And so my organization focuses on all things finance. We do small business accounting, taxes for small businesses, taxes for individuals. I'm a business consultant. I'm also an investment advisor. So I manage millions and millions of dollars of my clients' retirement assets. I have been an accountant, a CPA for a long time, and I absolutely love what I do. As Deborah said, we are all passionate about what we do, and I know that this is what I am supposed to do. I have been in business since 2002. And what I did in 2002 is I stepped out there and started on my own. But guess what, you all? I didn't have a plan. I was a CPA, and in my mind, all I needed to do was hang my shingle, say, here, I'm open, and the clients was going to come. And that just did not happen quite the way I expected it to be. I jumped out there without a plan. I jumped out there without knowing where my next client was going to come from. And after a while, my savings started to run out. The clients weren't coming in the way that they were supposed to. And yes, you need a savings to start a business. I'm not going to get into that. But in my mind, I had failed. I was in a place of desperation. I didn't want to answer the phone. I didn't want to open the mail. And I was chasing after clients. And trust me, clients can feel that desperation. I even remember Deborah calling a colleague of mine, well, not a colleague, a friend of mine who, very successful business owner. And I'm crying to her, trying to figure out, what am I going to do? This is horrible. And she said to me, well, maybe this isn't for you. And she didn't say it with malicious intent, but I tell you what, that thing crushed me. It crushed me to my core. But guess what, you guys? I did not give up. I'm going to say that one more time. I did not give up. I knew in my heart that this is what God had called me to do. And so what that said to me was, success is not going to just happen. I have to do something to make it happen. And what was that? I needed to look at my business through a different lens. And so what I'm going to share with you today is just a few nuggets, and I'm not going to be before you long, on just looking at things differently. So if you're out there, if you're struggling, if you're trying to figure out, is this for me? Can I do this? Just listen to me. Make a few changes, and I trust me, you will come out on the other side of this. And so, yes, it's time to look at your business through a different lens. So I'm just going to share a few nuggets with you. The first one is know your numbers. Well, what does that mean? Do you have financials? If you have financials, do you know what they mean? Are you using them as a tool of what they're supposed to be? Right? Did you make a profit last quarter? If you didn't make a profit last quarter, did you look at your financials and see, what can I do differently? But guess what? What if you did make a profit last quarter? I'm going to ask you the exact same question. If you look at your financials, what can you do to make it an even better quarter? Don't just have your financials to have them. Use them as a tool to make important decisions about your business. Look at your expenses. Look at what you're spending. When I was young in my business, I would spend $100 a month on this, $200 a month on that, $300 a month on something else. And at the end of the quarter, or even at the end of the year, I would look at those things and go, oh my gosh, I didn't realize I was spending so much on that. And so you won't know that unless you're looking at those financials. So I'm asking you, look at those financials. This next thing is super, super important. Are you tracking your cash flow? I'll use one of my clients as an example. They had more than enough revenue, right, to pay their expenses every month. But month after month, they kept coming up short. And they couldn't figure out why. And it was because they were not paying attention to their cash flow. And so, what does that look like? Taking your bank account from where it is right now and tracking all of the expenses you're spending every month, even if they're expenses that you're not supposed to be paying out of your business account. I'm not going to get into that right now, but just track all of your expenses. And one rule to this is don't change what you've been doing, because that'll defeat the purpose. Spend the exact same way that you've been spending. And whatever it is that's causing you not to be able to pay the bills at the end of the month will show up in that cash flow. Out of sight, out of mind, right? And if it's out of sight, you can't fix it. And if you can't fix it, then how are you going to make the difference, right? So the end game is changing the way that you're looking at how you're spending, keeping your pulse on how you're spending this money, and then fixing it, right? You can't fix it if you can't see what it is. So one quick thing is I want to just give you a plan of action for this section of what I'm talking about. If you don't have financials, make it a point to start tracking your income and expenses. If you do have financials, analyze them, understand them, start asking questions. If cash flow is an issue for you, start tracking it to see where you can decrease or eliminate unnecessary expenses. Okay, so that's one section. The next section, and this one is super, super important because this is something that I have seen ruin businesses time and time again. So I want you to pay attention to this. Don't sleep on the administrative stuff, the little things. And as I said before, when we did the little 15-minute clip, Deborah, this really came out when the PPP was in place, right? Because a lot of clients, a lot of business owners, they could not pull together their payroll reports. They couldn't pull together their financials. And this was an opportunity for them to get money, and they couldn't because the stuff that in their mind was probably the little stuff they didn't pay attention to. I had a client who came to me, and he was making millions of dollars per year. And he was not paying attention to the fact that his payroll taxes were not being paid. Now, I don't know where the finger is pointed. He pointed the finger at his accountant pointed the finger at him. But at the end of the day, the accountant went on about his business. This client ended up with a huge payroll tax bill. The IRS then in turn took money out of his bank account, and yes, they can do that. Don't think you can hide from them because you can't. They can take money out of your payroll, out of your bank account. They took this money out of his bank account. He could not make payroll, and he never recovered from this. And as a result, y'all, right now he's working a 9 to 5. And I'm sure that this was something in his mind that wasn't a big thing, but because he didn't have his finger on the pulse of something that was important, this was the result. So doing what you do best in your business is super important because that's why the clients come to you, right? But paying attention to this administrative stuff, keeping track of when the bills are due, how they're being paid, all of that stuff is so, so super important. So super important. Making sure your payroll taxes are paid, making sure your income taxes are paid, which we're going to talk about in a second. Those things, you cannot sleep on those things, and you cannot run from the IRS. So let's talk about a plan of action for that. If you are behind in taking care of all of that administrative stuff, if you can hire someone because it's worth the money. But if you cannot hire someone, what I want you to do is put on your calendar an appointment every week, 1 hour, 2 hours, whatever you can afford to do. And I want you to take care of the administrative part of your business. Please, 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 because it's so, so important. And you don't have to bite off the entire elephant. Just take bits and pieces of it at a time, but get it done, because that side of the business will ruin that. Not paying attention to that will ruin your business. So let's talk a little bit about taxes. Okay, everybody just had a panic attack. Everybody's starting to sweat. I know. Taxes is the word that nobody wants to hear. But I'll say this again. If you are paying taxes, you are making money. So look at it from that perspective. That's a good thing. Let's flip the script. It's not always a bad thing. What I will say, though, is let's not give Uncle Sam a penny more than he's entitled to. And how do we do that? By minimizing liabilities, by minimizing the tax liability, and maximizing write-offs. So what's one of the ways that we can minimize tax liability? One way that most people don't think about is retirement, putting money into a retirement account. It's almost a no-brainer. Give the money to yourself, give the money to Uncle Sam, right? And so what's happening is, instead of paying taxes on the profit on the bottom line, take some of that bottom line profit out, put it into a retirement account, which would basically eliminate or temporarily get rid of the taxes for that portion of the money, and you can keep it moving. My business owners that have employees, set up a retirement account for all the employees, right? You can give them a match. And at the end of the day, instead of giving that money to Uncle Sam, you're giving the money to your employees. So your employees are happy, the employer is happy. It's basically a win-win. It doesn't make sense not to do that if you can afford to do that. So that is one of the major tips of minimizing tax liability. The other side of the coin is maximizing write-offs. So what are some of the things that you can do to maximize write-offs? So first, here's my rule of thumb. If you spent the money on an item to help you generate that income or generate that revenue, then 99% of the time, it's a legitimate write-off. I'm using the word legitimate because I want you guys to stop creating expenses out there that don't exist. The IRS has been cracking down on that, and at the end of the day, it's not worth it. It's so many things that you can spend to write off in your business. As long as you're keeping track of that stuff, that's the most important thing. And speaking of keeping track of stuff, you can't write off something if you don't remember that you bought it. You can't remember that you bought it if the receipt is in the bottom of your purse. The problem with that is you'd be surprised how many times I've said to a client, well, how much did you spend on X? And they say, oh man, I can't find that receipt, but I think I spent about $500 on it. But what that tells me is that you're not keeping good records. If you're not keeping good records, I know there are expenses being missed, in which case you're giving Uncle Sam more than he's entitled to. So some of the other expenses that are super important that a lot of clients miss is the office and the home deduction, right? So I don't mean an office in your kitchen. I don't mean, sitting on your bed doing your work. You have to have an exclusive office in your home used for your business. And as a result of that, you can write off part of your gas and electric, you can write off some of your mortgage interest, your real estate taxes, and those are things that people don't think about. That's an expense that some people don't think about. Self-employed health insurance, that's another deduction that we can take. Publications, association dues. You can take a percentage of your cell phone. If you only have one cell phone, you can't deduct 100% of your cell phone bill because you do make personal calls. So just be careful with that side of the coin. And guess what, y'all? You can even write off the cost of this summit. That's a win-win, right? So the money that you spent on getting all of this valuable information today, you can write it off, but just keep track of it and keep good records. One of the other things that is super, super important to minimize expenses is not getting penalized unnecessarily. It doesn't make sense to not, if you're not going to do your tax return, in this case by July 15th, just do an extension. Don't pay an unnecessary penalty just because you didn't fill out one form that would have taken 10 minutes to do. And those penalties are steep. So pay attention to that. Paying estimated taxes. The IRS is a pay-as-you-go organization. They do not want you to pay all of the taxes at the end of the year. When you're making the money, they want their money, right? And so if you owe them too much at the end of the year because you're not paying quarterly estimated taxes, then they penalize you. Unnecessary money coming out of your bank account. So let's decrease the penalties. Let's change those things so that we can do things differently. So one of the things I will say is, what is the plan of action for this? If you can't start a retirement plan, if you can start a retirement plan right now, go ahead and do it. It's an excellent opportunity for you to minimize tax liability. The other thing I want you to do is, if you're not keeping good records, which goes back to the administrative stuff that we talked about, start today. Start tracking those expenses. I always tell my clients, one of the things, if you're doing it on your own, get an accordion folder. You can get one that's blocked off by month, as an example. Put all the receipts for that month in that accordion folder, and then write all of those expenses on a spreadsheet. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, but it's a sure way not to miss unnecessary expenses. Make sure that you're paying estimated taxes quarterly. Quarterly, you guys, not annually, quarterly. And the other reason for that is so that you don't end up with this huge liability at the end of the year and then have to go on an installment agreement or whatever the case may be, because you'll pay them double. I'm just telling you, I'm just being transparent, and I'm telling you the truth. One of the other things that I will say is, if doing your taxes is not your lane, please, please, please don't try to do it on your own, because it will cost you more in the long run. Trust me, it will. My last point, Deborah, is I want you guys to focus on growth. And how do you do that? I want you to pay attention to how much time you're spending on money-making tasks versus non-money-making tasks. Do you know what your return on invested time is? Are you doing stuff that you could delegate to someone else? So this is a tip that is a little different than the other tips, because I'm not talking about saving money. I'm talking about spending money to save time so that you can now focus on the growth of your business. What are you willing to sacrifice right now to get what you need later? When I hired a secretary for the first time, I remember her asking me, how in the world did you do all of this? And my response to her was, not efficiently and not effectively, right? But once I hired her, my revenue almost doubled. Why? because I was able to go out and focus on growing my business, not doing the mundane day-to-day stuff. Mm. And you might not be able to afford that right now, but one of the things I will say to you is start tracking how much time you're spending on money-making activities and non-money making activities. And if you are spending 70 plus on non-money making activities, I want you to change that around, because you'll be like me, how I was in the beginning, running out of money and running out of clients. I need you to pay attention to making sure you're purposeful about how you're spending your time. As I said to you before, block out time to do that administrative stuff, but it's super important to have a certain amount of time dedicated to growth of your business. And I will leave you with this final thought. Being good at what you do is super important, but make sure you keep your finger on the pulse of your business and what makes your business run. And remember what I said in the beginning, success, it doesn't just happen. There's no elevator to success. You have to take the steps. Thank you for your time.
Oh my goodness. Amazing. Whew, I got a lot of notes,
Good.
which to start on, but I just, first of all, again, thank you, Patricia, for taking your time out today. We know that you're not happy about sitting behind that desk after April 15th, but
it's all good. It's all good.
that shows you all, because you got to think about it. You know, they're used to, like we said earlier, being on the beach at this time with this
indeedy.
Text line. But I mean, so much that you talked about. One of the things I want to ask you is the system of tracking those automated, and maybe, I don't know if you've, investigated some of them or what you might be suggesting to your clients, but like, is there one in particular, these apps that, can track your miles and you can, track your receipts and all types of, is there one that you would recommend for people, or some type of system?
So, it's hard to recommend, because what I found is that if I recommended like an accounting system as an example, maybe QuickBooks or Peachtree or one of them, if you don't have a financial mind, and everyone doesn't, right? As I told you before, technology is not my lane. Like, if you tell me technology, I'm all over the place. So, and sometimes people with this financial stuff, it just kind of gets them here, right? So if you have somewhat of a financial background, then QuickBooks, Peachtree, any of those are fine. But here's the other side of that, Deborah. You could just keep an Excel spreadsheet. What I give some of my clients, we've created an Excel spreadsheet that just says January, February, all the way across, and list the expenses on the bottom. And they will type in their expenses for the month, and it calculates. And at the end of the year, they hand me that. Or at the end of the quarter, they'll hand me that so that we can calculate estimated expenses. It doesn't have to be that heavy. So if you don't have time to learn QuickBooks and Peachtree and all of that stuff, just use an Excel spreadsheet until you can get to a point where you can hire an accountant to do that type of stuff for you. I think people get so when we see things as a big task, and I know I'm guilty of this. If I see something and it's too big, I tend to not do it at all.
It's right? Too much. It's just too much.
And so all I'm saying is just get an Excel spreadsheet. If you don't want to do Excel, create a paper. Put it down on paper and do the exact same thing. Some people don't like computers. Write it on paper. It's not that heavy. Just do it. That's all I'm going to say. Just do it.
Awesome.
Right?
Awesome. Like Nike, right?
There you go. I had that in one of my seminars, and it was a Nike swoop, and I said, just do it.
Just do it.
There you go. There you go.
Again, thank you so much, Patricia. Patricia is in Baltimore and taking clients, like you said, you have clients all over.
All over the world.
Yes, all over the world. So, I mean, here she is, a wealth of information. I'm telling you, you want to reach out to her. You can go to thewintersummit.com. Again, all of the speakers' information is there. They will be there. Some of you all who are watching the replay now, you're watching it right on her page
Mm-hmm.
as we speak, and you can see her contact information right to your right there or to your left there on the screen. So please, please, don't wait. Like she said, don't wait. Reach out to her. And this is the last question I was going to ask.
Okay.
How do you, in 2 seconds, if you could answer this in that length of time, how will you know that it's time for you can go ahead? Is there a rule of thumb that you could share with people that, okay, you can go ahead and hire someone else to do A, B, C, and D? Like, is there a certain percentage of cash flow that you have, or is there a formula to that?
No, it's so. What I would say in a quick snippet, because I get this question all the time, is budget, right? And that's a whole different conversation. But write down or calculate what you're bringing in, what your fixed expenses are, and then see if you're at the end of the day, if you're at a negative, right, or you only have $200 or $300 a month after you finish that, then you need to flip back up and say, okay, what do I need to do to generate more income? But then look at that. The key is looking at that bottom line. And also looking at those financials and saying, okay, can I cut out this, and this to hire someone? Because hiring someone is more important than this, and this. So just look at those numbers and see where you can streamline, because it's important. I'm telling you that being in your business, doing this day-to-day nitty-gritty stuff is pulling you away from making revenue. I know it from experience.
Yes. Absolutely. Well, again, you heard it. None other than Patricia Veney out of Baltimore, CPA extraordinaire. We only have the best here at the Winter Summit. Everyone that you have been hearing today and will continue to hear today are passionate about what they do. That's because they live it, they do it, they're documented. And I'm praying that you are getting this information and that you're going to apply it. That's the best thing that that's the best gift. If you take this and apply it. Yes.
One thing I will say is I said a lot in a little bit of time, but if anyone can just take away one thing or even two things and implement it, then this was well worth your time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's it. Thank you so much, Patricia.
You're welcome.
We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Continue to have the most enjoyable day, and you'll be on that beach real soon.
Oh, please. All right. Take care, darling.
All right.